Now, let me ask you, Musk's proposal to cut $2 trillion from the federal budget represents nearly 30% of the total spending. How realistic or feasible, really, is this level of reduction without major disruptions?
It's a wonderful plan and a lovely idea, but for the most part, it will end up being mostly fantasy for the simple reason that cutting the budget by $2 billion is almost impractical and impossible since most of the federal budget are permanent payments to Medicare, Social Security, and other items that cannot be politically cut.
Mhm. Well, what about internationally? How might these proposed cuts specifically impact the U.S. foreign aid programs to key allies like Ukraine and Israel?
Well, first of all, if we're talking about cutting the budget, the one aspect is to increase revenue, which presumably Trump's plan to impose tariffs on just about everything that comes in the country would raise revenue, but it would also increase costs and it would be highly inflationary. In terms of foreign policy, since you asked, there's likely to be a deal for Ukraine, and Ukraine is going to have to do what it doesn't want to do, which is probably cede some territory to Russia, particularly in the areas that are more Russian than Ukrainian anyway, and make other compromises. So this will happen, but it's not the only effect it'll have on American spending is that we will spend a lot less in supporting Ukraine than we have already. So there will be some savings there.
Dr. Tanis, now defense spending is a significant part of the federal budget. So what challenges might arise from targeting it for efficiency-driven cuts?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Defense spending is the largest discretionary item in the budget. It's about $850 billion a year. But guess what? We now spend more than that on interest on the national debt. So the idea that Republicans are going to cut military spending is not realistic. Republicans generally like military spending. And cutting the national debt is almost impossible because, number one, interest rates are going up, not down, if you follow the currency markets. So that doesn't seem extremely practical either. But it really is extraordinary that the United States today spends more on interest on the national debt than we do on national defense.
What about Elon Musk's preference for fixed price contracts over cost plus contracts, which has been highlighted? Could this approach work in government operations, especially in defense?
Yeah, it could in some cases, but there'll be isolated cases. There are some cases, I mean, this gets into the nitty-gritty of budgeting and contracts. There are some cases, no doubt, where fixed price will work. But remember, your counterparty is a private corporation that's going to have to agree to it. And they'll only agree to it if they think they can make it work. So, yeah, it's possible. But whether it will have a major impact on spending is debatable.
Sir, now, with the US grappling really with rising deficits and debt, do you see this initiative as a necessary fiscal reform or an overly ambitious political statement?
It's a wonderful idea and it should be tried, and they will try to do it. But what they're going to run into enormous problems when you try to cut, for example, something in a state where a senator and a congressman have constituents who are not going to be happy about the cuts. You're going to run into a lot of obstacles in Congress of people who don't want anything cut in their backyard. They're basically going to say, cut the other guy's programs, but not mine.
Mhm. So what about the response or the reaction of the different political and economic observers and most definitely the public opinion, is there a very significant response or reaction to these proposed cuts?
No, because nothing has happened yet. I mean, we don't know what they are. The idea, they've come up with this wonderful plan that we're going to try to cut some of the waste out of government. Who's going to object to that? We all want that to happen. But the reality is it's going to be a hell of a lot harder. And when we get into the specifics of what they're going to cut, that's when you're going to see some reaction. Nobody is going to react badly to the principle.
Mm-hmm. And as preliminary statements by by Elon Musk and Vivek, do you feel that these were, or how were these sort of appointments or appointments by the president-elect received, at least by the public opinion and the political spectrum as a whole?
Well, we've seen already that some of them will not have any trouble at all. When you talk about people who are qualified for the jobs, whether you like them or not, Marco Rubio is perfectly qualified to be Secretary of State. Matt Gaetz is not the least bit qualified to be Attorney General, and one could argue some of the candidate for defense is arguably not qualified either. So it's going to be a mixed picture. Some of Trump's appointees are going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
They will get complete support on both sides. Others won't.
Dr. Peter Tanner, sir, the economic and political expert, thank you very much, sir, for your insights surrounding Elon Musk's budget proposal.